It's time for Lefties Losing It, and we're going to get to a very enlightening comparison shortly, but let's start with a bit of frivolity. Remember when Will Smith wasn't a massive beta joke before we found out his wife had boyfriends and he slapped Chris Rock for telling a very mild joke about Jada Pinkett Smith? Well, he's desperate to rebuild his image, and this song about how much he likes pretty girls may just be the most embarrassing thing I've seen in 2025, and I watch full episodes of The View for you.
I like pretty girls. Girls. I love pretty girls. Girls. I like pretty girls.
Sadly, the song doesn't get any better.
There's not a lot of women not pretty to me. I mean, she pretty to me, and I ain't talking about just the pretty you see. I like pretty girls. Girls. I love pretty girls.
That's enough of that, thank you. But if the official video wasn't bad enough, Will Smith decided to gather a crowd and perform that catastrophe of a song in London. And just check out how excited the crowd is.
I'll change your life if you let me, girls. I like pretty girls.
Yeah, no one's dancing, Will. Give it up, son. Talking about dancing, here is proof that leftism ruins everything. Here is Alyssa Milano. You may remember her from programs like Who's the Boss and Charmed. That was before Trump broke her. This is her now.
Think like that, I will love you endlessly. If you only believe me, don't you think like that, I will love you endlessly. If you only believe me.
You know, there's a bit of a Britney Spears vibe to these antics. Is it a cry for help?
He told a little story that sounded well rehearsed. 4 days on the run and that he's dying of thirst.
Now to that comparison I mentioned earlier, comparison between a year ago and now. A year ago, this man was the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world. Yep, the lefties wanted you to believe he was perfectly fine. No cognitive decline then at all. Well, that was then. This is now.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
Can you detect the subtle difference between those two leaders? One was a cognitively impaired puppet controlled by far-left radicals who empowered the Iranian regime through weakness and terrible deals, and one has devastated the mad mullahs of the Iranian regime. Now the Democrats are demanding that Donald Trump inform them before any future attacks. Here is Adam Schiff on CNN.
The failure to brief Democratic lawmakers, the making this just another partisan exercise by the administration. The president didn't seek the approval of Congress because he didn't make the case to the American people, because he didn't even inform one of the parties in Congress. That's when you have a real problem engaging in warfare on a partisan basis. So a lot of risks here for the country, which, you know, is the reason why you come to Congress in the first place.
Why would President Trump consult with Democrat lawmakers, the lunatic fringe who currently enjoy an approval rating south of 20%? And how exactly would you hope to blindside the Iranians if you are briefing the anti-American miscreants in the Democrats? Anyway, while the Trump administration was taking out Iran's nuclear sites, the Democrats were dealing with far more serious matters. They had Senator Alex Padilla crying on TV because J.D. Vance called him Jose.
Sadly, it's just an indicator of how petty and unserious this administration is. But he's the vice president of the United States. You think he'd take the situation in Los Angeles more seriously?
Now, predictably, there are many on the left who are having absolute meltdowns about these strikes against Iran. People like this next dude who is on Iran's side, on the side of Islamist terrorists.
And somebody in the White House needs to take Trump and sit his ass the down. Life already hard, then we gotta worry about this. Ever since you stepped foot in the White House, you ain't did nothing but cause mother chaos. I'm not getting out there fighting nobody. I'm on Iran's side. I'm on their mother U.S. I don't give a damn.
I like his cute little hat. I don't know, maybe that's an act of parody. You can't hardly tell these days. Now, as for the Democrats' propaganda arm in the mainstream media, they are floundering. Watch this on CNN. They're lucky enough to have a token conservative on the panel, Scott Jennings, and he always injects a little bit of sanity into proceedings.
In order for the president to take action without congressional approval, he needed to show that there was a real true threat to the United States and that the strike would not cause escalation. Congress must see the underlying intelligence about how they were in direct threat and how the U.S. needed to respond without congressional approval. But as of right now, I have not seen that.
You're arguing that after 46 years of the Iranian regime killing Americans, threatening Americans, saying over and over and over again, death to America, that maybe they were just didn't mean it, that they're fiery but mostly peaceful Iranian butchers?
And Vice President J.D. Vance was being asked over and over again, is America now at war with Iran? This poor guy was growing weary of pointing out the obvious.
The big question, is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, we're not at war with Iran, John. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and I think the president took decisive action to destroy that program last night.
First question, Mr. Vice President, is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, Kristen, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program.
Let's bring in Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, let's start with hearing what the president had to say shortly after the successful completion of the operation.
The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. The strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Josh, are we going to see more strikes, and what are the risks of Iran striking back?
Rita, the ball is totally in the Ayatollah's court right now. Iran has been crippled for really the past year and a half now, going back to the October 7th aftermath when Israel started really hammering Iran's various proxies throughout the region: Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. But really, since the war started in earnest about a week and a half ago with the IDF operation inside Iran, Iran has been absolutely pummeled. I mean, they are essentially kind of an animal that has been gored at the jugular, and they are kind of in their last dying breaths here. So the question, I think, for the mullahs in Tehran is, do you guys really want to go down like this, or do you want to try to come back to the negotiating table and try to take some sort of deal to, at a bare minimum, save your lives and get out of here alive? So the ball is very much in their court. If they do not want to be at war with the United States, they can choose to end this conflict, battle, war, whatever word you want to insert here. They have that power right now. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance's administration is willing to sit down and try to come to some sort of agreement here. It's probably not going to amount to much for them, but at a bare minimum, they will probably get away with it with their lives if they are willing to sit down. Now, if they are not, though, Donald Trump has now shown very clearly and unambiguously that he is ready, willing, able, borderline eager, you might say, to unleash the full fury and hell of the United States military and all that entails. This is obviously the first time in the history of the U.S. military that these specific weapons, these so-called bunker buster bombs, the mass ordnance penetrators, and the B-2 bombers, is the first time this has ever been used, and they were used to pretty spectacular effect there. So the ball is very much in Iran's court. I will say, Rita, as an American, I'm not terribly concerned about the possibility of Iranian reprisal for the very simple reason that they're very much out of cards at this particular moment. They're talking about shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and trying to then spike oil prices for Westerners at the pump. That is pretty much their last card that they have at their availability there. Their missile defense, their launchers, all of it is severely depleted at this point there. So I don't know how many more options they have here. Russia, China are not going to be swooping in to save them. They're not going to bail them out there. Iran is very, very weak, and they have the opportunity to try to save the mullahs' lives. But otherwise, I think, Rita, you could potentially see some more strikes if they're not willing to play ball.
And Donald Trump is now talking about regime change. He put out a post talking about MEGA, Make Iran Great Again. That's going to send a chill up the spines of the regime. The mullahs there will not want to hear about regime change.
Yeah, Rita, it's a very interesting time to be following this conflict, isn't it? So, I mean, this all kind of went down here on Saturday evening American time, and then you had the first initial statements from folks like Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, both of whom went out of their way to emphasize, as we heard from J.D. Vance there, that this is not a war against Iran, but a war against the nuclear program. Secretary of Defense Hegseth saying over and over again that the United States does not seek regime change. And now, apparently, as of Sunday afternoon, U.S. time, we don't know whether or not America is seeking regime change because Donald Trump is kind of throwing it open there as a possible speculation. We don't know exactly what he means, though. We don't actually know whether or not Donald Trump is talking about an Iraq 2.0 style attempt at forcible replacement, which in my personal estimation would probably be a mistake if it entails anything remotely resembling the Iraq or Afghanistan style prolonged commitment there, the attempt to kind of sculpt a Western style democracy. We've all learned our lessons there. It didn't work the last time. There's no reason why it would work this time as well. I
don't think he's talking about that. I don't think he's talking about boots on the ground. I think he's just acknowledging there that the Iranian people themselves want regime change, and perhaps that's signalling to them that America is going to be supportive, unlike Barack Obama, who pretty much did nothing. In fact, didn't give any comfort to the uprisings whilst he was president. Let's hear a little bit more about this historic strike on those 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Here is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
In and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator.
And Pete Hegseth also spoke about the psychological impact of the strikes on the Iranian regime.
Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace.
Josh, peace through strength, that's the motto, and I think that's what he's talking about there. That would be so utterly demoralizing for the Iranian regime.
You know, Rita, the funny thing about Donald Trump when it comes to his foreign policy is that you have a lot of the usual suspects in the establishment foreign policy ranks here, both on the right and the left and everywhere in between, that say, oh, Donald Trump has no cohesive view of foreign policy. There's no Trump doctrine, they like to say. But Rita, that's kind of the whole point. That's actually literally the point, that you have no idea what this guy is going to do. He's utterly unpredictable. Richard Nixon called this the madman theory of foreign policy, the madman theory of geopolitics there. That literally is the entire point. I mean, when Donald Trump said, we're going to wait 2 weeks to see if Iran comes to the table there, turns out that was a total ruse all along. It was a total attempt to kind of just turn them the wrong way. How about the fact that there were other B-2 bombers deployed over the Pacific Ocean towards Guam. They're a total decoy there. How about the whole fact, apparently, that for months and months, people from the Trump administration seem to be leaking to the media, implying that there was this big rift between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump didn't visit Israel during the Middle East tour there. And now you listen to Donald Trump's speech after the bombing over and over and over again, this repeated rhetorical emphasis on the shared interests and destinies of the United States and Israel, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu. So it was all a gimmick. It was all an attempt to just throw the opposition off guard. I mean, Rita, I think a lot of folks like to make fun of MAGA supporters for thinking that Donald Trump is actually playing 4D chess. But in this particular case, he wasn't merely playing 4D chess. He was playing like 400D chess. I mean, this is one of the most brilliant operations, one of the most brilliant extended moments, not just of his presidency, probably of his entire life there. I think Donald Trump looks utterly brilliant right now. Huge kudos as well also to Prime Minister Netanyahu, because the fact that Israel came in as hard as they did, that they crippled Iranians' air defenses and missiles launchers and so forth there, the nuclear scientists, these incredible Mossad operations there, the fact that they came in as hard as they did, I think was ultimately the final thing to convince Donald Trump to get off the table and support this operations there. And again, it's the United States military and all its hell and fury. What will the mullahs do? That's the million-dollar question at this point.
Well, what are the concerns of sleeper cells in the US, Iranian sleeper cells that took advantage of Biden's border crisis and came into the country, and they're ready to strike on US soil? We know the Iranians want to assassinate President Trump. How real are the fears that there could be attacks on US soil?
So I think it's a real concern. I'm definitely not going to downplay that there. There 1,000% are Iranian sympathizers here, many Hezbollah sympathizers there. I mean, anyone who's been in or around Dearborn, Michigan or Hamtramck, Michigan, I think knows that there are many people there who quite literally at times will fly the Hezbollah flag. There are a lot of people there with varying degrees of allegiance to the Iranian regime and their various terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. I think the key thing, though, to note, Rita, is this. This has been a problem for a very long time. There have been one-off lone wolf sleeper cells in the United States, in the Americas in general, certainly all throughout the European continent. This has been going on for a very, very long time. So it is a slightly heightened acute possibility of a lone wolf attack here or there now, a slightly greater possibility than there was a week or two ago. Sure, I think that's probably the case there, but it was also a possibility a week or two ago. You know, Americans were sobered up yet again on New Year's Day in New Orleans, Louisiana this year, where a jihadist who was radicalized at his mosque in Houston, Texas, drove to Bourbon Street in New Orleans and murdered 15 people in cold blood. So these things just tragically do happen. That's just the reality of Islam and Western civilization. They're not always necessarily a peanut butter and jelly style mix, shall we say. So that's kind of just the way that it is right now.
No.
Now, having said that, look, personally, I mean, I as a religious Jewish American there, I am definitely on higher alert than normal there. But I do think that ultimately, Rita, this is not the kind of thing that can possibly deter America from doing what is best in America's national interest. America has to do what is in its national interest, and the chips will fall where they may from there.
Now let's check in with the Trump deranged New York Times, once a serious publication, no longer. Now it's running these sorts of fact checks, objecting to Pete Hegseth referring to the male pilots as our boys. This is what the New York Times' John Ismay wrote. He wrote, in the briefing, Hegseth referred to B-2 pilots as our boys on those bombers, yet both men and women have been trained to fly them. Josh, I mean, come on. What is going on there? What an absolute idiotic thing to obsess about. I mean, they were male pilots. He was 100% accurate, and just because females have trained on them doesn't mean he can't use gendered language when describing what actually happened.
Rita, the United States military has dropped for the very first time the so-called MOP, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. They've done it a whopping 12 times by my count. I think 14 based on some estimates, 12 to 14 times they've done it there. But don't worry, the New York Times is on the real story, right? I mean, what an absolute joke. I mean, what an absolute fabulous joke here. I mean, if these people had any self-awareness, they would look at a Tempest and Teapot like this and say, wow, are we actually out of touch here by focusing on the genders of the pilots of the particular B-2 bombers and on the fact that, oh, gee, by the way, oh yeah, these planes flew 7,000 plus miles to blow the crap out of this most fanatical, evil regime's nuclear weapons program. Maybe, just maybe, that's actually the key story here, not the fact that Pete Hegseth is talking about, proverbially speaking, the boys in the planes. By the way, the fact that we have a young, telegenic, well-spoken, well-coiffed defense secretary who's able to talk about the boys in the planes, Rita, oh yeah, that's why U.S. military recruitment is at its best point in at least a decade, if not more than that.
Absolutely.
This is the whole point of Pete Hegseth. This is why people like me were so gung-ho about his nomination in the first place, because the way he talks, the way he acts, the fact that he fought in numerous post-9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he won the Bronze Stars there. He is in touch with the young men and women, to the New York Times' point, who are willing to pick up arms and serve this country there. So the fact that he's willing to kind of talk like this, talk like a boy, you know, irony intended, the fact that he's willing to talk like the boys in the cockpits there, that is very much a feature, not a bug, of the Pete Hegseth sector phenomenon.
And his own military record is, again, exemplary. And that's something so many in the media do not give him credit for. They just refer to him as an ex-TV host. Now, before you go, Josh, Donald Trump, many argue, should have got the Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, but he's not a globalist lefty, so he had little chance. But nevertheless, Pakistan has formally nominated President Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of his decisive diplomatic intervention and pivotal leadership during their recent India-Pakistan crisis, end quote there. And Josh, this comes as the Trump administration confirms a peace deal between Rwanda and the Congo.
Look, there's a lot of diplomacy going on the global stage right now. The big kahuna, so to speak, for Donald Trump when it comes to these peace deals is of course Russia, Ukraine. That's the one that he campaigned on, time and time again, day in, day out on the campaign trail. I think that Donald Trump is probably getting a little frustrated with that situation. But yeah, all around the world, you know, we've seen diplomacy in action right now. And look, the fact that Iran has one final opportunity to actually come to the negotiating table, again, they're probably not going to be able to salvage much. Their nuclear ambitions are totally donezo. It seems like if they come to the negotiating table, whatever deal might come is probably not going to result in the Ayatollah remaining in power. But if he wants to live out his remaining years in exile somewhere there, he has one final chance to do so there. So look, the irony, again, is that people say that Donald Trump has no foreign policy theory, no doctrine. He's a warmonger there. He's a Manchurian candidate for Vladimir Putin. He's a fascist, a Nazi. Rita, they have thrown literally everything and anything at this man. But he achieves peace. He achieves peace. He achieves stability there. And as we say here in the United States, just let the man cook. Because by letting him cook and letting his brain just kind of do what it does there and just call the shots like he sees there, the world ends up being a safer, more secure, and more stable place, as we've seen yet again with this fantastic and spectacular operation inside the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.